Okay. Now, do you have a copy of this kind of translation? I'm very unhappy with the translation, actually. I'll tell you what we're up to, but I'm gonna read. I'm going to read. I'm going to translate it from the Hebrew. So.
The resurrection of the.
Sorry.
Arranged with the resurrection of the.
I don't understand.
We're going to start from the resurrection of the dead is one of the kind.
No. I think we did this. Yeah. So, in this English translation is on page 13. And he's been talking about. Oh, okay. Here. But I'm just mentioning now that I've come to appreciate that this translation has a lot of infelicities, things that aren't really completely accurate. So I'm not going to read from it. You can follow it, but you'll notice that what I say is different because I'm going to translate it from the Hebrew. So he's been saying throughout the whole article that the reward for Torah and commandments is the world to come, and the world to come is this completely non-physical, non-bodily state, and it's something which we can't understand the content of, though we can understand certain negative remarks about it, but we can't understand it because it refers to a state of being which is different from our state of being, like a fish in water can't understand what fire is. And then he said promises of goods in this world are meant as means to be able to increase your performance of commandments and study of Torah so as to get to the world to come, which is the goal. So they are only a means. They're not the ultimate good at all. And then he says there is something which is referred to in our literature as Gehenna, and that is a place where the wicked are punished. But he says it's not. We're not given any detailed description of it, and the references that are made in the description of Gehenna make it sound like it is a physical condition in this world. It says the sun will draw close to these people and burn them, or they'll be attacked by an internal fire, their bodies will be on fire. That doesn't sound like it's in an entirely different reality. And he leaves it open. Then he says, Tchias HaMesim. Now, this is a third thing which we find in the sources. That's the resurrection of the dead. So you have to understand that means that what we call death is a separation of the soul from the body. That's explicit in the verses of Genesis, of the book of Genesis. When Rachel is dying, it says she's dying for her soul was departing. So it's not guesswork. That's what death is. Now, there is a principle of the resurrection of the dead. We're going to see it because, as we said at the end of this section, he goes through the 13 basic principles of belief. But now I have to be careful because, as we said over and over again, He says, Olam Haba, the world to come, is only for the soul. There's no body there. Not nobody, but there's no body there. So that means that even the people who undergo resurrection of the dead will die again. Because the only thing that goes into the world to come is the soul. So you have to understand that the resurrection fulfills some intermediary purpose, whatever it might be, and we will, Yes Hashem, speculate about that. But it's not permanent. Unlike what in the last 600 years, the vast majority have said that after the resurrection of the dead, the person, soul and body go into the world to come, and then you understand the resurrection is very important because that's who goes into the world to come. Soul and body together, the Rambam doesn't hold that. So it's an intermediary state for some local purpose, and then it gets transcended. And by the way, this idea that only the soul goes into the world to come means that Adam was created to die. Unlike the vast majority of people who, when they read the story of the tree of knowledge, they understand, correctly from many other points of view, they understand that had he succeeded in the challenge and not eaten from the tree, he would have lived forever. But since he ate from the tree, therefore he was subject to death. The Rambam doesn't hold that. Because the Rambam holds, in order to go into the world to come, you must die, because only the soul goes, not the body. So Adam was created to die. The pasuk says, in the day that you eat from it, you shall die, which sounds like if you don't eat from it, you won't die. The Rambam understands that to mean your life will be shortened. Shorter than it otherwise would have been. But not that death is being introduced. And there is, in one of the slichos, which Ashkenazim say, where it's talking about Adam, and it says, because of his transgression, kotzar yomav, his days became short. And I believe that's in a gesture in the direction of the Rambam, because if you're going from immortality to finite life, you wouldn't call that getting short. That's dying rather than not dying. So I'm inclined to think that that's a gesture in the Rambam's direction. Anyway, so he has just a few words here before he gets to it in the end. Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. It is a secret of the secrets of the Torah, of Torah's Moshe. There is no sector and no connection in the nearest people for someone who does not believe in the resurrection of the dead. But that is for tzaddikim, for great people. And he quotes a midrash, which says so. The power of the rain is for the righteous and for the wicked. And resurrection is only for the tzaddikim. And how the wicked will live, how should the wicked live when our tradition says that even when they're alive they're called dead? How should they, after physical death, come back to life? And this is what the sages said. The wicked, even when they're alive, are called dead. And the righteous, even when they have died, are called alive. And no, here it is, man will of necessity die, and he will divide into those elements that he's composed of, meaning soul and body. Those two will be divided. Man must die. And that was just as true for Adam HaRishon as it was when he first created, as it was for anybody who comes afterwards. Now, yeah.
Just about that local function that Techiyat HaMetim has, why it refers to, like, well, because this part explains us the reasoning, but what's that specific function for?
What's the function for it? So I'll tell you what I think. The Rambam says that the way that you earn, the way you prepare yourself for the world to come, is by acquiring knowledge of Hashem and by perfecting your character. I know, everybody thinks he's only a philosopher, and everybody thinks all he wants is knowledge, and he's influenced by the Greeks and so forth and so on. It's just not true. He says in the Parish of Mishnayos that if a person embarrasses someone in public, he can lose the world to come. That has nothing to do with his knowledge of theology. That has to do with extremely bad behavior. So the situation is more complex, and he believes in dveikus, and knowledge is only a prelude to dveikus. It doesn't produce dveikus. And okay, it's a long story, and I'm writing a book on it, among other things. But now he makes clear that knowledge of Hashem and perfection of character and performance of mitzvahs have to be done here. That's the qualification for getting into the world to come. What about a person who is prevented from learning Torah, learning about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, performing many mitzvos through no fault of his own? Because of war, because of sickness, because of responsibilities that he has for people in his household, and he ends up without the requisite knowledge. Is he going to lose out? The Rambam doesn't mention this. He doesn't raise the question. But since it's quite clear that it has to be done in this world, I think one of the features that makes it possible is resurrection. Because it's that same soul coming back into the world embodied. And then mitzvahs can be done, and Torah can be learned. And if you say, but after the resurrection, the times of the Mashiach, there won't be any free will, so he won't get any credit for it, there are two answers to that question. First of all, the Rambam does not say that there won't be any free will. And the Ramban, who does say it, at least openly contradicts himself, because he says on the one hand there won't be any free will, on the other hand it'll be just like Adam in the Garden of Eden, where he certainly had the free will to commit the transgression. And I've asked many people that question, how can the Ramban be reconciled? I've not gotten an answer. But remember, I don't know how many times I said this, probably not often. Remember that for the Rambam, this world goes on forever. So the temple will be standing, and sacrifices will be offered, and people will eat matzah on Pesach, and they'll blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and they'll have mitzvahs to do, and there'll be agriculture and tradesmen and business, and all of normal life is going to go on. Yes, the social and religious conditions will be different. People will understand that the Torah is true, and that the Jews are the ones who carry God's presence in the world, and so on and so on. But that doesn't mean you can't make wrong decisions. That doesn't mean you're not subject to temptation. It means there'll be circumstances under which someone who sincerely wants to accomplish will find it much easier. So what the purpose is of a world that goes on forever, and new people are being born all the time, and new people are dying all the time, and their souls are going to the world to come all the time, as far as I know, it doesn't go into detail. But that's the situation. So here's this person who lived in the Middle Ages and was subject to pogroms and expulsions and diseases and everything else. and he accomplished very little by way of understanding Torah and understanding HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he'll get Tchias HaMesim in a circumstance where he'll be able, with some measure of free will, he'll be able to fill in the spaces that he needs in order to qualify for Olam Haba. So first of all, there is some measure of free will in that period of time for the Rambam. Secondly, someone who brings about a condition in which it's much easier for him to do mitzvos, if he brought it about, then he gets credit for the later accomplishments because he made them possible. A person who comes to yeshiva and puts on tefillin and keeps Shabbos and all the rest, he's not going to be told after 120 years, well, that year in yeshiva doesn't count because it was real easy. Everybody else was doing it. What do you mean? He took off the year to go to yeshiva. He created that environment for himself. So he gets credit for that. Now, the coming of Mashiach and Tchias HaMesim is not just something that happens like the weather. We pray for that. And prayer is a way of making an effort that it should come about. So when it actually takes place, we've invested in it. And since we've invested in it, it's appropriate for us to reap some of the benefits that will take place at that time. Those are two ways to explain why. Sorry. What's going on? No. I have to turn it off. 1 second. Okay. There's no reason why you shouldn't reap the benefits for that. So that's one way of explaining what the interim period of Tchias HaMesim will be. Now, whether it'll go on forever or whether the people who are born into the world after the Mashiach comes, the circumstances will be so different that there won't need to be Tchias HaMesim later for them. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know anywhere the Rambam describes that. But the need for it, given the background of the history that we've had in our period of history, it seems to be quite clear in this respect. And of course, it could play a dozen other roles that I'm not aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, so, since a lot of people hasn't accessed a lot of the mitzvahs because there's no temple, so it comes together with the temple, the Tchiyat HaMetim, so that there will be certain mitzvahs that can be done with Tchiyat HaMetim, so that then reach that perfection?
Well, that's an interesting question. That I don't know. That's an idea that's associated with the Kabbalah, that everybody needs to have some kind of connection to all 613 commandments. And if you lived at a time when the temple wasn't standing, you're in trouble. So then something has to be done. It has to be overcome somewhere. I'm not aware of such an idea in the Rambam at all. So, could be, yeah.
After the Tchias HaMesim, when will people die? Like what?
I'm sorry, say that again, I didn't get you.
After the Tchias HaMesim,
yeah.
When will people die?
So according to the Rambam, they'll die like they die now.
Is it out just...
I mean, I don't know what the average age expectancy will be, but...
As in someone that will come up from the dead, will they have a new life, or they'll just be up for like one day or...
I don't know how long the Tchias... If my explanation of Tchias HaMesim is right for the Rambam, then there'll be a considerable period of time for each person. Because there'll be an opportunity for that person to fill in what he wasn't able to do in his lifetime when the circumstances have made it impossible. So that would mean for each person. And the sources we have on this aren't clear whether it'll be a one-time event where everybody gets up at the same time, or whether it'll be extended over hundreds of years. I mean, there's a lot of discussion without any way of settling what the truth is going to be. Yeah.
It sounds like the character development part of it is something that's every person has a no excuse for before Tchias HaMesim, and the knowledge of Hashem is something that only some people are able. Everybody has no excuse for character development, but only some people are able to get this of
Let's try it
knowledge
again.
of Hashem.
Let's try to say it again clearly. What do they have no excuse for?
For neglecting character development.
Oh, but now you put in a crucial word. You put in the word neglecting.
Yeah.
But we weren't talking about neglecting. We were talking about not being able to do enough to qualify for the world to come. I didn't mention at all the idea of someone who neglects Torah study. That means he's reading the Sunday Times, which has 150 pages, and it's just too busy to learn. No, we're talking about a person who would learn in all the spare time that he has, and he snatches 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there, but doesn't accomplish enough in his learning to be able to qualify for the world to come.
Okay.
That's not neglecting. That's just a person who couldn't do it. That's what I was talking about. Now, the question is whether you have the ability to perfect your character no matter what circumstances you're under. I think that's extravagant, especially since we've seen that the Rambam envisions character development as a process, and it could be a long-term process. And it's hard to imagine that, well, maybe even have his direct right to it. That a person's under wartime, you say, yeah, but you didn't perfect your interpersonal sensitivity when you were shooting bullets at the enemy. But now, this is a new thought for me, but I think this is right. The Rambam says that, I said it in the 2 words before, I've done it previously in more length, in the 9th chapter of the laws of Tshuva, that the promises for this world are that if you keep Torah mitzvahs, God will make it easy for you. He'll give you wealth and health and peacetime and resources and everything else. And if a person fails, turns his back on it, then it'll make it hard for him. It'll make it hard for him to do. So wartime and poverty and sickness and extra responsibilities make it hard to do. They really do make it hard. Well, now, what about a person who's a tzaddik, but who lives in wartime because of other people's transgressions? That happens. Because war and peace are collective judgments, collective positions that are according to a whole community. So now you have this person who's a tzaddik, who can't perfect his character or can't learn because it's wartime, which the Rambam says objectively makes it hard to do these things, or even makes it impossible to do these things. But he's not at fault. So he can be in a position where the circumstances do make it impossible for him to accomplish, and he doesn't deserve to lose because of that, because it wasn't his fault. So that would make what I'm saying even more necessary. I didn't think before of taking what he says in chapter 9 and applying it to this circumstance and deriving that it makes it either very hard or impossible. Okay. Okay, now he comes to Yemos HaMashiach, the Messianic era. This is a time when the kingdom will return to the Jewish people, and they will return to the land of Israel. And the king who will be over them at that time, he'll take the seat of his kingdom will be Zion, and his name will become great and will fill the whole of the earth, even greater than the kingdom of Solomon. And the nations of the world will make peace with him, and they will subject themselves to him. All the lands will subject themselves to him, they'll accept his authority, his power, because of the greatness of his righteousness. And the wonders that he will do. The wonders they will see through him. Now, the wonders here don't have to be miracles. He could conquer the world. He could bring world peace. He can establish a functioning world economy. I mean, those are also wonders. The word niflos here, I don't think, has to mean supernaturals. Supernatural. Kuf Lamed Dalet. Let me just see what they say here. Right. They quote here what he says in the Mishnah Torah. Don't think that he has to do miracles. That's not necessary. So the niflos here don't have to be miracles. And anyone who sets himself up against the Mashiach, Kodesh Baruch Hu will cut him down. And will hand him over to the Mashiach's power and authority. And all of the language of the Tanakh, of the Holy Scriptures, testify to his success and our success with him. And here comes a crucial statement of the Rambam, which he makes many times. Nothing in the nature of the world will change from what it is now. Just the Jewish people will have their own independent kingdom, and the language of the sages on this matter is Ein bein olam hazeh limas Mashiach ela shibud malchus bilvad. The only difference between our world, the Rambam's world 900 years ago, our world today, the world of the Mishnah, the only difference between our world and the time of the Mashiach is the fact that we will have our own independent malchus. We will not be under the control of foreign powers. And in his days, there will be strong and there'll be weak in comparison to people. However, in those days, it will be easy for people to support themselves, very easy, such that a certain minimal amount of work for a person will get great benefit. He knows what stocks to invest in, right? And this is what it says, Asin Eretz Yisrael, lo tzi gluskaos, uklei melas. Now here's an example of how the Rambam reads Chazal. In the future, Chazal say, the earth is going to give forth loaves of bread and finished clothes. It does not mean that they're going to have loaves of bread springing out of the ground and suits growing on trees. That's poetry, says the Rambam. What it means is that it'll be very easy to earn a living. If you were talking about making enough money to stay comfortably alive in today's world, you could do that on 30 hours a week. 30 hours a week? People used to work 12, 14 hours a day. 7 days a week! Just to stay alive. So in comparison to what life was for mankind 1,000 years ago, we're living in a paradise. Of course, we want a Lexus, so we crush ourselves with extra overtime hours so as to compete with the neighbor down the street. But that wasn't. That's certainly not necessary. So things will be extremely easy to maintain a person's support. And he explains the poetry. When a person did something with great ease, they say, for example, in our language, we would say he had it handed to him. It doesn't mean somebody put it in his hand in an envelope. It means it was easy. It came smoothly. Didn't require great effort. And he says, a proof to the way he's describing it is a verse in the book of Isaiah. It says that strangers will be your farmers and they'll take care of your lands and your vineyards. What do you mean, farmers? What do you mean, lands and vineyards? Didn't you just tell me that loaves of bread are growing out of the ground? What do you have to do agriculture for? No, you have to do agriculture. And you have to have a vineyard, and you have to be pressed to wine, and so forth and so on. But it'll be easy. That's a proof that there will be sowing and reaping. And therefore, the rabbis were upset with someone who said the following, Al Talmido, someone who didn't understand what he was being taught, and thought that the words were according to their simple dictionary meaning, that a 6-year-old would get looking at it with a dictionary. Oh, Rabbi, it says loaves of bread will grow out of the ground, doesn't it? Yeah, if you're 6 years old using a dictionary, you could think that. That's right. But if you're a little older, a little more sophisticated, then you see that that's not what's meant. And they responded according to his ability of understanding. But that's not the real answer. The real answer is that it's not literally meant, as he said already 3 times. That people have to understand it's not literal. And it says because that they didn't answer correctly because there's a verse in Mishlei. Now the Rambam quotes one verse here out of 2. It says, "Al tan sil ki valto." Don't answer the fool according to his crookedness. So if they say, Rabbi, it says they're going to be loaves of bread, they should have been told, yes, that's poetry, and what it means is things are going to be easy. They shouldn't have been answered as if to take them literally. Now, the Oki Tov is a whole parish on the Haggadah, which I'm not going to go through, but he points out that this verse in Proverbs, don't answer the fool according to his crookedness, back to back with a verse that says, Aneik sil kilvalto, pen yeh chacham be'einav. Answer the fool according to his crookedness, complete contradiction. So, the one that says here, don't answer him, is pen tishve lagoma ata, lest you be equal to he. And the one that says you should answer him is, you should answer him lest he be wise in his own eyes. And Rabbi Kitov says a beautiful, beautiful pshat here. Here's this fool spouting his foolishness. Let's say he's a Christian missionary, or he's a current leftist, or whatever. He's talking his nonsense. Now, there are 2 possible interactions, and there are 2 possible good and bad outcomes. And you have to choose which circumstance you're in. Some people say what they say because that's what they've heard. Did they research it? Could they prove it? Could they argue for it? Not really. It's the fashionable thing. Like I and all my friends went to college as atheists. Have we read a book on atheism? Of course not. Have we read a book on theism? Of course not. But you can't believe in God because, you won't have any friends. And they won't pass you the drugs. So, you got to be an atheist. There are people who say, lots of people, I'd say the vast majority, say what they say because that's what's popular and that's what they've heard. If you don't challenge him, after 20 years he's going to say, look, I've been saying this stuff for 20 years. No one ever challenged me. It must be right. Just because no one ever challenged me. Must be everybody agrees to it. To that, King Solomon said, Aneik sil valto, answer him according to his crookedness, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Because if you don't answer him, then he's going to think he's wise. He's going to think he has the truth. So you have to acquaint him that there's another point of view and challenge him. That's someone who isn't 100% sure of himself. He's repeating what other people are repeating, but he himself hasn't built up a detailed, researched rationale for what he believes. But there are people who have built up a rationale, or people who have been convinced and trained that this is the only possible right way to think, and then when you argue with them, they won't listen. And if you argue with them and they don't listen, then to the onlooker, you look and sound just as stupid as they are. You say something, and he either doesn't answer you, or he changes the subject, or he makes fun of you, and then you say something again, and he doesn't answer, and he changes the subject, makes fun of you. The onlooker says, why are you wasting your time? What's the matter with you? Don't you realize he's not listening to you? Don't you realize he has nothing at stake here? Why are you wasting your time? You look just as stupid as he. You should fold your cards and go home. Leave him alone. Let him drown in his own stupidity. That's altan silki valto, pentishvila gamato. Don't answer the fool according to his crookedness, lest you be equal to him. You're just as foolish as he is. So the whole game in life is figuring out who you're talking to. Is he the first kind of fool or the second kind of fool? And that dictates what kind of answer you should give him. Don't feel if you turn your back on that kind of confrontation that you're letting God down or letting the Torah down or letting the Jewish people down. Follow King Solomon's advice. You can rely on him. It doesn't need me to tell you to rely on him. And if he's the kind of person who isn't listening, have a nice day. Have a nice day. Like people who say to me, prove to me there's a God. I say, go get a cup of coffee. I should prove to you? Why should I prove it to you? Why should your acceptance or non-acceptance be the success of the project? Ask me to give reasons to believe in God, I'll give you reasons. And if they don't convince you, then you're in trouble. You don't listen to reason? What's wrong with you? Why don't you listen to reason? You need help, probably psychological help if you don't listen to reason. That I can do. But prove it to you so that the judge of the outcome is when the person says you didn't convince me? I'm not in business of convincing you. I'm convinced of giving reasons and seeing whether you will take the reasons and act on them or object with reason. But simply say you're not convinced? Not into that project. Thank you. You have to choose your battles. Okay, so that's what he says about... so he's talking here about when people refuse to see that there's more than the simple 6-year-old literal meaning involved in the statements that are being given. Now, so things are going to be very easy. What's the purpose of that period of time? The great value of the time of the Mashiach is that we will have rest, release from the pressure of the foreign governments, which prevent us from all the good actions. Hello, you budding philosophers. He didn't say study, understanding, brilliance, inference, and so on and so on. All the good actions. And knowledge will expand. 2 things, separate things. As it says, Ki molo haaretz de'es Hashem. The whole earth will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. And all the disturbances and wars will be ended. We say goy cherev, people will not raise swords up to fight with one another. And there will be great perfection found in those days that we can merit through it the life in the world to come, which is what I told you before. And the Mashiach will die, and his son will reign in his place, and his grandson will reign in his place. And that's already been predicted. The Mashiach will not fail. He will not end his career until he has established justice in the world, and his kingdom will go on for a very, very long time. And people themselves will live long periods of time, because when the great fears and worries, anxieties that attack people, that has an effect on their health and shortens lifetime. It wouldn't be surprising if his kingdom went on for thousands of years. Because when things come together and integrate with one another, they don't quickly come apart. Now, he leaves open here whether it's finite or infinite. He just says it's an open-ended period. And by the way, if he says thousands of years, so those of you who know that the Gemara talks about there being a limit of 6,000, the Rambam rejects that. And the reason he rejects it is because, first of all, he thinks the people who accept it don't understand what it means. And he says, and even if they do, it's one opinion, and he believes there are verses and other opinions in the Talmud which contradict it, and he therefore rejects it as authoritative. Yeah.
So, how does the Rambam sees the relationship between the days of Mashiach and Tchiyat HaMetim? Like, is it?
He doesn't say. He doesn't say in detail. And in fact, in the end of the Mishnah Torah, he says the exact way in which these things will take place is impossible to know. Which order and how long each one will be. And he says, don't be surprised if they go on for thousands of years, which means I'm not predicting it one way or the other, but nothing rules that out. And the reason he says it there, I don't know, I find it very surprising, but this is what he says with great emphasis. He says, our only information about the time of the Messiah and the resurrection and the rest comes from verses in the prophets. And those verses are ambiguous and vague and contradictory, and there's no oral tradition, which is quite a gigantic thing to say. There's no oral tradition on what's called eschatology, the knowledge of what's happening at the end. And therefore, he says, we have no way of knowing how it will work out. When it happens, we'll be able to look backwards and see that, what the verses meant. But before that, we're not able to do it. It's a very dramatic statement there. Now he says, why do we desire the coming of the Messiah? Not because of the great crops and the great amount of money, and not so we can ride on horses and drink out of to drink with instruments playing at our banquets, as the people with confused ideas think, similar to the first five that he had in the first five groups. No. We desire it, and now he uses a very strong word here. His Avolem Anavim, the prophets, desired the time of the Messiah, and the Hasidim, the great pious ones, longed for the times of the Messiah because of the great honored gathering that will be at that time, and the management of life for good and for wisdom, and the righteousness of the king, and the greatness of his wisdom, and his closeness to his Creator. As it says, the pasuk in Tehillim calls him B'ni Ata, you're my son. And all of Moses' Torah will be fulfilled, not just sitting and studying philosophy. Hello! All of Torah's Moshe will be fulfilled without any weakness, without any disturbance. Nothing will prevent it. As was promised, people will not teach each other war anymore. Everyone will know me, from the great to the small, and I will place my Torah in your hearts, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh. Many, many verses speak that way. And through the activities of that time, the people will achieve their presence in the world to come. And the goal, as I've said over and over again, of all of this process is the world to come. And that's what your efforts are aimed at. Your efforts are aimed at the world to come. So he has Gan Eden, and he has the Tchias HaMeisim, and he has the Mos Mashiach, all of that, but all of it is only as a way to get to the world to come. So in a way, these last words indicate what I was saying, that even Tchias HaMeisim is on the list, and even that is just an opportunity to do what is needed to do to get into the world to come. So that I feel in much more detail, but the general idea is there. Okay? So now he goes back to the beginning of the Mishnah, with the first words of which he says, see how the Mishnah began with a statement of the ultimate goal, and the only goal is all Israel has a share in the world to come. That's the title of this whole section. What about Mos Mashiach? What about Tchias HaMeisim? What about Gan Eden? He only says one thing: the world to come, because that's the ultimate goal. Of course, the other things are important as means to this goal. They aren't trivial. You'd like to make sure there's enough oxygen also, wouldn't you? I mean, without oxygen, nothing works, right? Yeah, oxygen is important. But the Mishnah starts with a statement of the ultimate goal. That's the first sentence of the Mishnah. So it's telling you something gigantically important. It's not just, listen, all of the most important, you should know you have a slot. It's giving you a philosophical perspective. I'm telling you have a slot because that's the thing of ultimate importance. That's what's really important. That's what you have to learn from this. Not just as you'd say, okay, I'm all right because I have a slot. That's what the beginning of the Mishnah is meant to convey. All right? Okay, it's 20 after. Very good. Now tomorrow, the Yeshivat Hashem, the JLE group is coming. So for this hour, I will do something entirely different. An introduction to them of sort of basic ideas which they could make use of. And after that, at 8:30, there will be the Q&A. And that will be open to everybody. But I suppose I'll give them precedence because they're only here for one day.